Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to take it as axiomatic that understanding the implications of security market design change for market quality is an important goal for all market participants. Indeed, if this is not the case, I have effectively wasted the last 10 years of my life trying to design and build a system capable of achieving this goal. What I find less axiomatic is what market participants mean by security market design change and market quality. For this reason, I'm going to take a couple of minutes to ensure we're on the same page. I think of a securities market, indeed markets in general, as consisting of 5 fundamental elements, namely technology, regulation, information, participants and instruments. Putting all this together, a range of market participants use information to trade financial instruments, most often these days facilitated by technology and constrained by regulation. Broadly speaking, there are 5 market participants, only 3 of which trade. Market participants include regulators and market operators who don't trade, and financial intermediaries, corporates and investors who do trade. Notwithstanding that regulators and market operators don't trade, they are front and centre in decisions to change market design, as are financial intermediaries. Curiously, until recently, the 2 parties that have generally been absent from the market design debate are investors and corporates, the 2 parties that benefit and suffer most from good or poor decisions regarding market design. This is because market design decisions have the potential to impact both the cost of capital, so corporates, and the cost of trading, so investors or investment managers. Market fragmentation and high-frequency trading in particular seem to be the touchstones that have suddenly got corporates and investors more interested in market design debate. But how do they do it? Is there an existing process or mechanism by which they can easily become engaged? This requires us to look at the current situation. When changes are currently proposed to a marketplace, and it has to be said that changes are coming quick and fast these days, what is the mechanism that we currently use to adjudicate differences of opinion between various participants after a particular participant suggests a change to the market? The broad answer to this is that regulators are charged with the task of adjudicating what market design changes are authorised. For this purpose, it is important to look at the mandate of regulators. In this respect, we are rather fortunate because, unlike other marketplaces, the mandate of securities regulators is pretty consistent across the globe, namely, to ensure that markets and changes thereto are fair and efficient. Collectively, we refer to these concepts as market quality. Other terms are sometimes used in these mandates, like transparency and orderliness, but I argue that these are means to an end and not ends in themselves. Accepting this point, what this means is that the cornerstones of market quality are, in fact, fairness and efficiency. Further, that in order to sign off on market design changes, regulators must assure themselves that changes that they are asked to authorise pass the dual tests of fairness and efficiency. In this sense, optimal market design is given a practical definition. It means a market design change that enhances both fairness and efficiency, but as a minimum does not lead to a deterioration in either. In the process of assessing security market design changes against their mandate, regulators have adopted the practice of calling for interested parties to provide evidence on the impact of the change on market quality. Notwithstanding these calls, very little by way of hard evidence is provided in support of market design changes, with the consequence that the bulk of such changes rely heavily on regulators to collect the evidence, which is a costly, time-consuming, not to mention thankless task. The cost alone explains why it sometimes takes considerable time for changes to be made, and why in general regulators have an unenviable task. Another reason is that the academic community, whom many regulators rely upon because of their apparent independence, interpret market quality as synonymous with market efficiency, preferring to believe that market fairness can be resolved by making the market more efficient. Suffice to say that I don't agree with that. Following the lead of academics, however, I do believe it is important to define and seek operational measures for both fairness and efficiency. Following this lead, I define an efficient market as one in which it's cheap to trade, the cheaper the better of course, and one at which the price of securities reflects all available information. This definition leads to 2 important concepts to measure, namely transactions costs and price discovery. I define a fair market as one in which the propensity of market participants to engage in prohibited trading behaviours is minimised. Following this definition, there are three key prohibited trading behaviours, and they are insider trading, market manipulation and broker-client conflict, all of which, as it turns out, are the key outputs of a modern-day surveillance system. Incidentally, this helps explain why I began my work on market quality by building a real-time surveillance system. That surveillance system was the Smarts Market Surveillance System, which is now in more than 40 national exchanges and regulators and 60 international brokers across 50 countries. So these people do have some experience in market quality, you might say. To close the loop, we need to consider the outcome of the process, namely optimal market design and what that means. To me, it's pretty straightforward. Regulators need to support changes that enhance both fairness and efficiency, but at the least, that enhance one of the elements without adversely affecting the other. Unfortunately, this is not as easy as it sounds. When one understands that it has cost about $50 million to develop and maintain the SMART system, it's little wonder that regulators have had to wait for such systems to be commoditised before they could handle even one of the two elements. Add to this fact that very few parties like change, and you get a bit of a sense of the task that regulators find themselves in. So how do you get around this problem, particularly in individual markets where there's only so much change that will be tolerated? There is only one way, I suggest, and that is to consider market design change as a collective experience across markets and look to learn from changes in other markets. Of course, this is not cheap either. To secure data for all major world markets is likely to cost more than $1 million a year, again suggesting why we don't see regulators actively embracing the concept. So how do we break the cycle of costs such that studying the impact of market design change in any market of the world is a simple and affordable task? This goal explains the mandate of the Capital Markets CRC very succinctly, and in particular its latest product offering, the Market Quality Dashboard. In its simplest form, the Market Quality Dashboard is designed to measure the impact of market design change in any market of the world. To do this, it first identifies all market design changes over a 10-year period. It then sources tick data, that is intraday trade, quote, and information announcements for these markets over the relevant period. This data is then used to build metadata in the form of metrics representing fairness and efficiency. Finally, all these elements are combined into software as a service, accessed through the internet with a series of intuitive visualizations which allow users to quickly and effectively identify the impact on fairness and efficiency of any market design change. Seeing is believing, of course. Let me demonstrate the product by asking what the impact of introducing the Arrowhead trading system had on the Japanese equities market when it was introduced recently. MQ Dashboard's opening page has 6 horizontal elements, namely summary, global venues, local venues, groups and instruments. It has 2 horizontal user-driven elements relating to groups and venues and metrics of interest. For this example, we open the Global Venues tag, and in the Groups and Venues menu, we select the Japanese market. Choosing effective spreads, which is an element in the transactions cost sub-menu, in the graph which appears, what is immediately apparent is that there was a structural break in the metric around January 2010. To appreciate what might be causing this change, I turn on the Events tab on the far right of the screen. Once I do this, all major market design changes to have occurred in the Japanese equities market over the relevant period will appear. I will now zoom in on the area surrounding this change to reveal Event 14. When I tick on this event box, up comes a description of the market design change that occurred at that time. What it shows is that the Arrowhead trading system went live on the Japanese market on January 4, 2010. The introduction of the Arrowhead trading system had quite an obvious impact on the transactions cost in the marketplace because effective spreads visibly dropped from around 22 basis points before the introduction to approximately 18 basis points in the immediate aftermath, a change of around 18%. We would of course also want to see what impact the change had on price discovery to get a full picture of its impact on efficiency. To do this, I have chosen another metric called price impact, which shows no perceptible change around the introduction of the Arrowhead trading system. A reduction in trading costs with no change in price discovery suggests that the introduction of the arrowhead trading system has been positive for the efficiency of the Japanese marketplace. The next question we would need to ask before we conclude what impact the change had on the overall quality of the marketplace is, what did the introduction of the arrowhead trading system do to market fairness? To address this question, I have chosen two additional metrics, namely information leakage, which is a proxy for insider trading, and end-of-day price dislocation, which is sometimes used as a proxy for market manipulation. The choice of these two metrics follows from my definition of market fairness as minimising the extent to which market participants engage in prohibited trading behaviours. There are broadly three classes of prohibited trading behaviours, namely insider trading, market manipulation, and broker-client conflict. Because the market quality dashboard only currently has access to publicly available data, I am limited in my choice of metrics. Users can extend their array of available metrics by accessing private market data, which is an option in the system. I will now zoom into an area surrounding the introduction of the arrowhead trading system and argue that there has been no perceptible change in the fairness of the marketplace as represented by these metrics. Subject to ensuring that the other metrics for efficiency and fairness tell us the same story, we can conclude that with no change in fairness and a positive change in efficiency, that the introduction of the arrowhead trading system has been positive for the Japanese marketplace, and measure just how positive it has been. In this example, I used the introduction of a new trading technology. I could easily have looked at the introduction of a new regulation, for example, the introduction of a messaging tax, the banning of short sales, the introduction of circuit breakers, or the introduction of minimum price improvement in the dark, many of which are the subject of short videos on the CMCRC's YouTube channel if you're interested in following up. This sort of technology makes the mandate of regulators now attainable. The CMCRC, in association with data partners, is making the technology available to regulators all over the world. Given the ever-increasing workload of regulators, the adoption of technology is not necessarily a panacea, of course, because you have to have people capable of using and adapting it to the needs of particular organisations. The CMCRC is also making available trained PhD students associated with the technology to assist in the process, as it has already done at the FCA in the UK, the OSC in Canada, and ASIC in Australia. We invite your interest.